Hello, my name is Roberto Garcia, and I'm the Focused Ion Beam Lab Manager at the Analytical Instrumentation Facility, or AIF, at NC State University. Today, I want to talk to you about how to use the FIB more efficiently. During training, I show users how to use the keyboard shortcuts so that many of the actions they will need to use during their sessions are quick to access. However, I've also noticed that many users don't use them after they're trained. Use of the keyboard shortcuts will greatly elevate your efficiency and help speed up the process of making a FIB TEM specimen. This video is designed for the intermediate level user. So this is for someone who has already trained, has been able to make successful TEM samples, and really wants to learn how to do it a little bit faster and a little bit more efficiently. So I don't recommend this for like new users or people who have not used the FIB before. The instrument we're using today is a Thermo Fisher Quanta 3D FIB. It's a gallium beam FIB, and the software version that we're using for the computer is Windows XP. So yes, it is a little bit older. And also I want to take a look at the interface here. Okay, so this is the version of the interface that we're using, and I want to show this to show that this is basically the vintage of this instrument. Okay, so all the shortcuts that you're going to learn today are very specific for this instrument. Now, I have noticed that in more recent instruments that Thermo Fisher makes, they have kept the same shortcuts and have even added to them to make it more functional. So everything you learn today, you will be able to apply to other instruments, but there may be slight differences. So just be aware of that. And like I said, there's 3 essential shortcuts that I think if you learn, you're going to be able to function a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficiently. So the first of them involves the stage. Okay, so most of the time when you're making a sample, you're going between 0 degrees being perpendicular to the electron beam, or 52 degrees being perpendicular to the ion beam. Okay, so most of the time I see people coming over to the stage controls here, either going through the drop down or actually typing that in and hitting enter. Okay, and that's all fine. However, you can just hit, if you want, Control I to go to 52 degrees or perpendicular to the ion beam. So it's a good way to remember it. Control I will get you to the ion beam. Okay, and the same thing, if you want to go to 0 degrees tilt, you hit Control E, and that will get you to the electron beam. Okay, perpendicular to the electron beam or perpendicular to the ion beam. Okay, so it's kind of a very quick shortcut, and that will help you out quite a bit, because most of the time you're going to be in another page, and let's say you've got to go to 52 degrees. Well, now you've got to hunt around for the stage controls and then drop down. So you can see that it's a lot quicker, and if you're doing this enough times, it's going to shave off some time off your sample. Okay, the other third essential is pause. Okay, most of the time you have the pause right up here, and I see people always constantly looking for that pause button. No matter where they're at, they'll come up here, but it's just as quick to hit the shortcut, which is F6. Okay, F6 pauses and unpauses whatever your beam focus is. So F6 pause. If I go to the ion beam and I hit F6, I'm going to unpause the ion beam. Same thing. If I'm in reduced area, same thing. It's now the reduced area that gets paused and unpaused. Okay, so if you learn nothing else from this video, those 3 shortcuts will save you a lot of time. A lot of times I see people trying to focus and stigmate over here on this very tiny screen here, and that's okay. A lot of people can do it, and if you're in a rush, if you're a beginner or intermediate, you're probably going to want to use a little bit larger area. All right, so you can go to full screen mode. So that's going to be F5. So it takes whatever quadrant you're in and makes it full screen. So now it's much easier to see the area that you're looking at or the features that you're looking at, and to be able to focus on them and also do your stigmation. Okay, so everything's just a little bit bigger. If I want to do the reduced area, I can, and you'll see that's a little bit clearer, a little bit bigger. And this works on everything. And once you're done, just hit F5 again. Okay, so I'm going to use F6 to pause again. Like I said, you can do that to any quadrant here. So if I want, I can go to F5, I can unpause here, and then I've got my ion beam image. F5 again, I can even look at the infrared camera if for some reason I wanted to, or this other quadrant here that can be set up to do anything. In this case, we can set it up to be another image of the electron beam, and I can go ahead and increase that one as well. Okay, so that's just kind of like a handy tip. If you're struggling to focus and stigmate, just go ahead and go to an area and make the screen bigger. It'll just make it easier for you. The other thing is that, and you already probably saw me do this, is the reduced area. So let's go ahead back to a full screen. So if I'm doing reduced area, I mean, this button right up here, you can go ahead and press it. But if you want to do it quickly, F7. F7 gives you your reduced area. In combination with F6, you can then move this around. F6 again and start it up. And this really helps out. Most of the time you're going to be using this, one, if you need to concentrate on an area to focus on or stigmate. But more than likely, you're going to be doing this when you're in the ion beam. Yeah, but more than likely you're going to be doing this when you're in the ion beam, and you need to basically get focus away from the area, focus and stigmation away from the area that you're interested in. So let's say I'm interested in this center spot here. I want to go to F7, and I'm not going to focus and stigmate there. I'm going to come over here so that I don't ruin that area, because every time you turn on that ion beam, it's going to damage that surface. So I'll go ahead and hit F6 and do all my focusing and stigmation over here. The stigmators. Okay, F6 again, and then F7, and then if I want, I'll take a snapshot here. And you can see where I burned that area over there on the right-hand side, but not the area that I'm interested in, that little center cross there. I'm not a big fan of automated features, but I've started to realize that some are very useful. Now, I know for intermediate level users, a lot of times getting the right contrast and brightness is a little bit daunting. A lot of times you'll get something like really dark and this is as you're changing currents, or something overly bright, and you don't know whether to adjust your contrast or your brightness. I'm going to give you a clue. It's usually the contrast, but just to do this a little bit more effectively and quickly, you can do the automatic brightness and contrast, which is up here, this little, looks like a little black and white cookie up here. Or the shortcut for that is F9. Okay, so you see that took a couple of seconds, and it really gave me a very good starting point to get some good contrast and brightness. If I'm going to take an image, I might adjust this down a little bit more. Just it's personal preference, but it gets you to a really good starting point. Okay, so let's pause there and come over here to the electron beam. We'll unpause that. And again, that's overly bright. Let me hit F9, and it's going to adjust the contrast pretty well. So most of the time it will actually work. I would say 99% of the time. If for some reason it's not working, usually your contrast is too high or too low, adjust your contrast a little bit and then try it again. Another shortcut that's very handy is a stage shortcut, okay? And what that is if I want to get to the center of the stage, and a lot of times you'll do this if you've got several samples on your stage and you want to just kind of get your bearings sometimes as you're moving around or rotating the sample or doing things, you kind of get a little bit not really sure where you're at on a particular stub or a particular sample. So you can always find the center of the stage, okay? So if I go, let me hit F9 to adjust my contrast again. Oops, let's go back here. So you can see in the FTIR image, I'm a little bit off of center. If I want to go back to center, I just hit Control and 0. Okay, and it will center it. And that is only going to control the X and the Y. And I'll show you an example of that. Let's go back to the last position. And we're going to go to the ion beam, so Control I. So now if you notice, I've got my X and my Y are a little bit offset. My Z, of course, is at the eccentric. My tilt will be at 52 degrees and my rotation's at 10, okay? But if I want to go to the center of the sample stage, I can again hit Control 0, and notice the only thing that's changing is the X and the Y, okay? It's not going to adjust your Z, your rotation, or your tilt, okay? And this is handy, again, if you've kind of lost your way, you want to get your bearings on your sample, but also when you do your shutdown procedure, you want to always center the stage. My tin ball samples here, and let's say I want to zoom up in magnification. Well, you can use the control knobs here to slowly step up. Alternately, you can also use the plus or minus keys. Okay, so if I hit plus, all it's going to do is it's going to double the magnification. So if I want to get quickly up to a very high magnification, I'll just hit the plus key a couple of times. If I want to, I can go ahead and hit the minus key to reduce the magnification, again by a half. It's totally up to you. That's like a quick little shortcut for magnification. Now let's talk about focusing a little bit, okay? Most of the times, most people will focus with the focus knobs, and it's fine to do. I mean, that's what most people do, so it's not a big deal. You can do the coarse focus or the fine focus. As you focus, notice what's happening to my magnification. It's gonna change just a little bit, right? So it's not exactly at 10,000 anymore. It's at 10,006. And that's not bad if I'm just, if I'm not taking any images, if I'm just looking at it, I really don't care that much about having an accurate or the same magnification. But typically what happens is people take images for publications or for just comparison, and you want to make sure that they're always at the same magnification. But one quick shortcut to make sure you get to the nearest rounded off magnification is to use the star key. Okay, so if I hit the star key, it's going to go to 10,000. Okay, so let's try that again. Again, I'm focused a little bit off now. So if I had a bunch of images and I was focusing and taking these images, you'd see that they'd all have like a different magnification. One's 10,006. They're all going to be fairly close, and you have a micron bar on the image, but it is always nice to compare things all at the same magnification. So just hitting the star key will get that there. The other thing you can do is use the mouse to focus. And I show this to people. Usually younger people tend to use this a lot more than the older people like me. But if you press down the right mouse button, you can now see that my cursor, I guess you can't see it on the screen, but my cursor turns into a double arrow. And what I can do now is drag left and right. And that's going to change my focus. Okay, so once I get my good focus, if you notice, I'm at 9,994 in the magnification. I'm going to now release the right mouse button and it pops up to the closest magnification. Okay, so that's another way. If you never really want to worry about having the same magnification, Just being off magnification just a little bit when you're focusing with the mouse, it's always going to come right back to the 10th, to the rounding off to the largest magnification. So that's just one good way to always make sure that you have the same magnification in there. The other thing is beam shift. Now, everyone's familiar with the beam shifts on the keyboard. If I want to, I can go to here. I can move the beam. I'm using the knobs to move the beam shift, or I can even grab the beam shift over here with these little crosshairs and move it over, right? Let me go back and center that. But the other thing that I can do is if I hit down the shift key and the left mouse button, if I go over to an area that I want, and in this case, I'm gonna go up to this small tin ball at the top here, and I'm going to left click on it. My cursor then turns into a hand, and I'm just gonna drag it down to the center. Okay, and it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so it basically takes the feature that you want and you can just drag it right to the center rather than trying to zero it in and get it perfect with these left and right. It just makes it a lot quicker. Okay, so the next couple of shortcuts I'm going to show you are going to be some that you're not really going to use a lot of. But they're handy to know. Okay, let's say I'm off focus, or let's say I'm bringing in the needle. Okay, the lift out needle. Now, the lift out needle, when it's at the eccentric, is going to be at a working distance of 10 millimeters, right? Our eccentric is about 10 millimeters. That's why it's highlighted over on the infrared camera there. So if I want to get a quick focus, I can use the focus knob and I can just look at the working distance under the on the image there and set it to 10, and I should be pretty close. But if I want to do it quickly, I can just hit Control F. Control F, and that's F for focus. Control F focuses on the eccentric position for each image. So now for the eccentric position on the electron beam, it's 10 millimeters. If I go to the ion beam, the eccentric position is going to be at 19 millimeters. Okay, so I'll show you that. We're going to tilt over. We'll probably be a little bit out of focus. If we're not, but see, it's very close to 19. So if I'm just not on that eccentric position, I'm going to hit Control F, and it automatically sets that focus to 19. And it's not going to be perfect. It's a little bit off, but you'll see that it gets you close enough. Image rotation. Okay, so sometimes you'll come in and you might actually find that the image rotation is on. Personally, I prefer to rotate the entire sample. So if I wanted to have this crosshair perfectly aligned, I would just do the stage rotation. But sometimes you just want to line things up in your image and you want to make it perfect without changing your position on the sample. So what you do is you hit Shift F12, and now you have your scan rotation interface on the surface on your screen here. So what I can do is I can just left mouse click on this little arrow and kind of rotate it around until I've got that set to the point where I want it, so it's nice and horizontal. It tells you basically how much you're rotated off. And when I'm done, I don't want to see this all the time, so I'll just hit Shift F12. As a reminder, you can see on the lower right-hand section of the screen that I do have this little icon here, and that's telling me that my image rotation is on. The other thing you'll see is that the scan rotation is showing up in the infrared quadrant. Okay, and it's green. Now, I can do the same thing with the ion beam, the center cross is a little bit off. Shift F12, same thing. I'm going to rotate this around to get it nice and horizontal and perpendicular. Then Shift F12 to turn it off again. And if I go back, now you see I've got also scan rotation on the ion beam. Okay, so green is the electron beam, red is the ion beam. I tell you this only because a lot of times people forget to turn this off, and I don't want you to get a little bit shocked if you see this on. If you see those numbers on there, it means that you've got some image rotation, and that may screw you up as you're going through and looking at your sample, trying to locate a particular area. So just make sure that if someone left it on, you turn it off. So what you'll do is you'll hit Shift F12 again and just hit the 0 and it'll 0. Then Shift F12 to turn it off. Pause, we'll come over here, same thing. Shift F12, it lets you know that it's not exactly at 0. You hit the 0 and it turns it off. Then Shift F12 to turn it off again. Okay. The next tip is something that I find users struggle with quite a bit. A lot of times if you have a sample, let's say something like this, where it's very featureless, I'm in the ion beam, I can go ahead and try to focus on something. But if I don't have any features or anything on the surface, it's going to be very hard to focus and stigmate. So this is just a quick little tip that I give most users. If you have something like a semiconductor or a sample that's very flat and featureless, create your own kind of mark on the surface. And we'll do that by going to Scan and Spot. Okay. So now you'll see this little green crosshair shows up, and I can move that anywhere. And two things happen. One, green crosshair shows up, but also if you look up here, this little icon here, this is the beam blank, right? And what it is that the beam is blanked, and so I can move my cursor anywhere I want, and I'm not damaging the sample. Well, let's say I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to set that up there, and then I'm going to unblank the beam. So I can hit Control B, which is a shortcut to beam blank. Control B. Control B, you'll see that little cursor kind of pop up. Okay. So, and then I'm going to count to 10 Mississippis or 10 seconds. And that's going to create this tiny little, basically just drill a little hole on the surface of the silicon or the sample. Click Control B again. And then to get back to full screen mode, to get out of the spot mode, it's Control M. Then I'll hit F7. Got my reduced area. I'm going to move it right to where the crosshair was, and then F6 to unpause. And you can see that I've got this small little feature there that I can now use to focus and adjust my stigmation with. Okay. So that's just something, like I said, I see a lot of users struggling with this sometimes, trying to find something to focus on. A lot of times we tell them to go to the edge of the sample, but sometimes you want to do it really close to the area of interest, not damage the area of interest. But if you don't have any features to focus on, it's going to make things very difficult. Okay. Okay, most people are used to navigating by double clicking. So if I want to get this crosshair in the center, I'm just going to double click where I want it, and it's going to move it over. And that's fine. You'll see that most of the people will use, most of the students using the instruments will do that. There's other ways to move. One way that I typically move is if I want to make sure that I don't damage anything in this area. This is my area of interest. I want to make sure I don't damage it when I'm in the ion beam. I want to just move over to either to the left, to the right, and then come back. So if you use the arrow keys, it's going to move over 80% of the field of view. Okay, so I'm going to push the left arrow key, and you can see I've moved over kind of 80% of the field of view. You can kind of see on the side here the raster burn that I have. So it doesn't move over an entire field of view, it's just 80%. So if I was trying to be very careful in the ion beam and make sure that I don't damage a particular very good area that I'm interested in, I will actually set up just to the left or the right of it, do all my adjustments here, do all my focusing, all my stigmation with the ion beam, make sure everything's okay. Of course, I'm using the electron beam right now as an example. And then what I'll do is I'll just go back to the same area by hitting the right key and then take a snapshot. And that was my original area of interest. Another way of moving around on the sample is basically to use the wheel on the mouse. If you click and hold down the wheel button, you'll get this little dot. And then you can use this arrow to basically move in whatever direction you want. Okay, so it's not up, down, left, right, it could be diagonal or so. It's gonna move the stage depending on where that arrow goes. And the speed at which it does it depends on how far away that arrow is from the center of that spot, wherever you put that spot. So you can go back. I find this easiest to use when I need to go over a very large area. And to stop this, I just hit the center mouse wheel again. But let's say I need to move over quite a bit. Instead of doing a bunch of clicks, what I'll do is I'll push the mouse button and then just move it over quite a bit. Okay, particularly if I'm scanning over, if there's an area that I know I want to get to, I can quickly get to it. These next tips will be more concerned about patterning. I just want to make sure that people understand them a little bit, because it's, again, trying to get you to do things a little bit quicker. So let's go back to the ion beam. Okay, F9 adjusts our contrast. F6 to pause. Okay. So right now, if I want to, I can go ahead and make a pattern on here, and let's make this square pattern. I want to make it exactly 10 by 10, and we'll leave it at 1 micron deep. But let's say I want to do a set of patterns and do them at different depths, different Z amounts, but I want to keep the same kind of size. Or if I want, I can just make them all the same depth if I want to make that kind of pattern. Instead of trying to draw this out each time and making the adjustment here, delete, I'm gonna hit Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. Okay, so this is just like every other program you have out there, Control-C, Control-V. So you can see I can get these all set up fairly quickly. And I can set these up wherever I want. Okay, I can make this as complex a pattern if I want. I can do it, set it up to be parallel or serial. If I want, right now they're all set for the same size, same depth. But if I wanted to, I could go ahead and change the depth on here, make this 10, make this one 5 or so. So now I've got all these patterns here, okay? So that's a quick way to set up these patterns. The other thing is, if for some reason you want to do these patterns continually, let's say you want to take a look at the removal rate comparatively across several samples or so, you want to save your setup here. So what you can do is you go to File, Export, Patterns, and then go ahead and save your patterns. I'll say rectangle 2, save. Okay, so now I have all my patterns saved. So what I can do is basically, let's say I've done my patterning, now I want to go to another area, or I want to go to another sample. Let's, I'm going to hit Control-A to select all the features here, and then delete to get rid of them. So again, that's another shortcut that is very common in Excel and Word processing. So you should be familiar with those. But let's say I want to get that same pattern back. I'll just go back to File, Import, Patterns, and then I'll search for that file. That's going to be this Rec2, open, and they come back. Okay. This video is really for the intermediate user, and I would say come back to this every now and then, learn a few shortcuts. Definitely learn the top 3 shortcuts, which is just basically positioning the stage under the electron beam or the ion beam, and then the pause and unpause button. And then anything else you learn is basically going to help you out through the whole process. Right. Thank you very much.